The alarm screamed at 5 in the morning, and I reached across my tiny bedside table to silence it before it woke my mother. I stared at the cracked ceiling for a few seconds, wondering if today would feel any different from yesterday. It never did. Every morning began with the same question, and every night ended with the same answer. I still worked a minimum wage job. I still counted every dollar before spending it. And I still loved a woman who seemed more disappointed in me with every passing day. I pulled on my blue grocery store uniform, looked at my reflection in the mirror, and forced myself to smile. "You got this," I whispered. The smile disappeared almost immediately. By 6 o'clock, I was stocking canned vegetables in aisle 7. Customers walked past without noticing me. Some smiled politely. Others acted as if I were invisible. I had learned not to take it personally. Honest work was still honest work, even if nobody respected it. "Morning, Ethan," my manager, Mr. Collins, called. "Morning. You came in early again. I wanted to finish the delivery before the store gets busy." He nodded. "I wish everyone had your attitude." "Thanks." His words gave me a little comfort. It wasn't much, but sometimes one kind sentence was enough to help me survive another long shift. Around noon, my phone vibrated. "Emily." I wiped my hands on my apron before answering. "Hey, where are you?" she asked. "At work." "I know you're at work," she replied sharply. "I meant what aisle?" I frowned. "Aisle 7. "Why?" "I'm outside. Come here. I'll be there in a minute." I hurried toward the entrance and found Emily standing beside her car. She looked beautiful in a white dress and expensive sunglasses. People walking by kept glancing at her. She folded her arms. "You still have that uniform on?" "I've been working. I can see that." I tried to smile. "You look nice." She ignored the compliment. "My coworkers saw you carrying boxes last week." Emily picked me up the next evening without saying much. The silence inside her car felt heavier than any argument we had ever shared. I straightened my tie and tried to smile. "You look nervous," she said without looking at me. "I just want a night to go well." "Then don't argue with anyone." "I never do." "I mean it, Ethan." "I know." When we arrived, her parents welcomed us with polite smiles that felt forced. Her Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan were already seated at the dining table. Everyone greeted Emily warmly before turning their attention to me. Her father raised an eyebrow. "So, Ethan, are you still working at the grocery store?" "Yes, sir." "For how much longer?" "I don't know. I'm saving money while looking for better opportunities." Her uncle laughed. "Saving minimum wage? That must take forever." A few people chuckled. I forced a smile. "I'm doing my best." Emily quietly looked down at her plate instead of defending me. Her mother poured herself another glass of wine. Emily always dreamed of traveling the world. "I still hope we can someday," I said. Her uncle smirked. "With grocery store coupons?" More laughter filled the room. I felt my face grow hot. Emily finally spoke. "Uncle Robert." For a brief second, I thought she would stand beside me. Instead, she sighed. "They're only joking." I looked at her in disbelief. "It doesn't feel like a joke." Her father leaned back. "Ethan, let me give you some advice." "I am listening." "A man should build success before asking a woman to build a future with him. I am building one. Slowly. I know, and my daughter deserves more than promises." His words hurt because they carried the same doubt Emily had been showing for months. I placed my fork on the table. "I may not earn much today, but I work every day. I pay my bills. I don't ask anyone for money." Her mother shrugged. "That's the minimum expectation." Silence settled over the table. Emily finally looked. "Have you ever stood in a crowded room, surrounded by people, yet felt completely alone?" "I have. There was a time when I believed that honesty, loyalty, and hard work were enough to build a happy life. I believed that if I loved someone with all my heart, supported them through every struggle, and never gave up, everything would eventually fall into place. I was wrong. The people I trusted the most looked at my paycheck before they looked at my heart. They measured my worth by the size of my wallet instead of the strength of my character. Every long shift I worked, every dollar I saved, and every sacrifice I made seemed invisible to them. No matter how hard I tried, I was never enough in their eyes. But life has a strange way of changing everything. Sometimes the very people who laugh at your struggles become the ones who watch your success from a distance. Sometimes the doors that close in your face are only preparing you for better ones to open. And sometimes losing the person you thought you couldn't live without becomes the reason you finally discover who you really are. This isn't a story about becoming rich overnight. It isn't a story about easy revenge. It's a story about pain, dignity, impossible choices, and the quiet strength it takes to keep moving forward when your entire world seems to fall apart. There were days when I questioned myself, nights when I wondered if everyone was right about me, moments when giving up felt easier than taking another step. Yet every disappointment taught me something that success never could. The journey you're about to hear is filled with heartbreak, betrayal, unexpected friendships, painful lessons, and moments that changed my life forever. Every decision carried a consequence. Every conversation left a mark. Every setback pushed me closer to becoming the person I was always meant to be. So before this story begins, I want you to ask yourself one simple question. If the person you loved believed your vow, I wish I could tell you that I saw it coming. I wish I could say I recognized the warning signs before everything fell apart. But the truth is, love has a way of making you ignore the things everyone else can clearly see. Every small insult became just a bad day. Every broken promise became, she didn't mean it. Every moment that made me question my worth became another excuse to try even harder. I kept believing that if I worked longer hours, saved more money, and sacrificed a little more of myself, one day everything would finally be enough. I didn't realize I was slowly losing the one person who needed my love the most. Myself. Looking back now, I can still remember the tired look in my own eyes every morning as I put on that blue grocery store uniform. I wasn't ashamed of my job. I was proud that I earned every dollar honestly. What hurt wasn't the work. It was watching the people I loved treat that work as if it made me less of a man. Every customer who thanked me reminded me that kindness still mattered. Every paycheck reminded me that honest effort still had value. But every conversation with the woman I loved made me wonder if the world had forgotten those truths. There were moments when I stood in front of a mirror asking myself questions I never imagined I would ask. Was I really a failure? Was I moving too slowly? Did dreams only belong to people who were already rich? Or was I simply loving someone who could no longer see the man standing in front of her? Those questions followed me everywhere. They followed me to work. They followed me home. They even followed me into my dreams. Still, every morning I chose to get up. Not because life had become easier, but because giving up would have meant agreeing with everyone who said I would never become anything. What I didn't know was that fate had already begun writing a different ending for my life. An ending no amount of money could have bought. And one unexpected meeting W. The morning sunlight slipped through my apartment window, but it didn't feel warm. It felt like another reminder that time kept moving whether I was ready or not. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. The man staring back at me looked tired. His eyes carried sleepless nights. His shoulders carried invisible weight. For months, I had believed I wasn't enough. Not handsome enough. Not successful enough. Not important enough. I finally asked the reflection one question. Who told you that? The room stayed silent. Then I answered myself. I did, because I believed everyone else. Those words hurt more than any insult I had ever heard. I dressed for work, grabbed my lunch, and locked the apartment door behind me. The city was already awake. People rushed toward buses. Coffee shops were full. Cars filled the streets. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going. I wondered if I would ever feel that certain again. At the grocery store, I started arranging boxes on a shelf when an older coworker walked over. You've been quiet lately, he said. I've been thinking. Careful, he joked. Thinking before breakfast can be dangerous. I laughed. It wasn't a big laugh, but it was real. Whatever you're carrying, he continued, don't carry it forever. I'll try. No, he corrected gently. Choose to. His words stayed with me for the rest of the morning. Around noon, a little girl accidentally dropped a loaf of bread while helping her grandmother shop. I'm sorry, she whispered. You don't have to apologize, I said as I picked it up. I made a mess. No, I smiled. You made me slow down long enough to help. The grandmother thanked me before leaving. As they walked away, I realized something. Kindness had never made my life harder. It had always made it lighter. That afternoon, my shift finally ended. Instead of going straight home, I walked through a nearby park. Children laughed while chasing pigeons. Had always believed that if I worked hard enough, life would eventually become easier. I was wrong. Every morning, I unlocked the small neighborhood hardware store before the sun came up. The smell of fresh wood, paint, and metal filled the air while the streets outside were still quiet. By the time the first customers arrived, I had already stacked shelves, counted inventory, and swept the front entrance. My manager, Mr. Carter, walked in carrying his usual cup of coffee. "Morning, Noah." "Morning. You look exhausted." "I didn't sleep much." He studied my face for a second. "Family problems?" I forced a smile. "Mostly money problems." He sighed. "I wish I could tell you those disappear with age. They don't. They change their names." I laughed quietly. It wasn't much, but it felt good to laugh. The bell above the front door rang. An elderly woman entered, looking around nervously. "I walked over." "Good morning. Can I help you find something?" She smiled with relief. "I hope so. I'm trying to fix an old rocking chair my husband built years ago." "What happened to it?" "One leg cracked." I carefully looked at the broken piece she had brought. "I think we can save it." Her eyes brightened. "Really? I wouldn't let a chair with that many memories disappear." For the next 15 minutes, we searched for the right wood glue, screws, and finishing polish. Before leaving, she asked, "How much do I owe you for all the advice?" I smiled. "Nothing. You already paid me." She looked confused. "How?" "You reminded me that some things are worth repairing." She thanked me and slowly walked outside. Mr. Carter had been watching from the counter. "You never rush people. I know what it's like to feel lost." He nodded. "That's why customers keep coming back." Around lunchtime, business slowed. I was organizing a shelf when a man wearing an expensive suit stepped inside. Everything about him looked out of place in our little store. I never imagined that a single phone call could make my hand shake before I even answered it. The number on my screen was unfamiliar. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. Instead, I answered, "Hello." A calm voice replied, "Am I speaking with Noah?" "Yes. My name is Daniel Brooks. I don't think we've met." "We haven't." There was a brief silence before he continued. "But someone who knew you very well asked me to call." My heartbeat quickened. "I think you have the wrong person." "I don't. Who are you talking about?" He preferred that I explain everything in person. I frowned. "I have work. I understand. But I believe you'll want to hear what he left behind." The words caught me completely off guard. "Left behind?" "Yes." I sat down in the empty break room. "I am listening." He always spoke about a young man who treated people with respect even when life gave him very little in return. I swallowed slowly. "I don't understand." "You don't have to." "Not yet." After ending the call, I spent the rest of the day unable to focus. Every customer who smiled at me reminded me of those strange words. He left something behind. For whom? Why me? That evening I met Daniel in a quiet office overlooking the city. He stood to greet me. "You came." "I almost didn't." "I'm glad you changed your mind." He handed me a sealed envelope. Across the front, only my first name was written. Noah. Nothing else. "Open it." My fingers hesitated before breaking the seal. Inside was a short handwritten note. "If you're reading this, it means life has given you another chance. Don't waste it trying to become impressive. Become dependable." I read it again. Then again. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't a secret. Yet those few words felt heavier than anything I had carried in years. Daniel watched quietly. He believed character was the only investment that never lost value. I looked up. Why would someone believe that about? Mr. Hayes became one of the most familiar faces in the store. At first, I knew him only as the quiet elderly gentleman who always entered with a warm smile and greeted everyone politely. Unlike most customers, he never seemed to be in a hurry. He would slowly walk through every aisle, carefully looking at the shelves before choosing only a few simple items. After paying, instead of leaving immediately, he would stay near my counter and start conversation. At first, we talked about ordinary things, the weather, the neighborhood, and how business was going. I assumed he was simply lonely and looking for someone to talk to, so I always gave him a few minutes of my time whenever the store wasn't busy. As the weeks passed, Mr. Hayes became a regular visitor. He came to the store several times every week, and our conversations gradually became longer and more meaningful. What surprised me most was that he never asked questions about my salary, my position, or whether I planned to find a better job. Instead, he asked questions no one had ever asked me before. "What kind of person do you want to become, Ethan?" he asked one afternoon. The question caught me off guard. I smiled awkwardly before answering. "I don't dream about becoming rich, sir. I just want to build an honest life, take care of my family, and never become someone who forgets where he came from." Mr. Hayes smiled with quiet satisfaction. "That's a rare answer," he said softly. "Most people tell me how much money they want. Very few tell me what kind of character they want." From that day forward, our conversations became less about everyday life and more about who we truly were. He asked me about my childhood, my biggest mistakes, my proudest moments, and even my greatest fears. Sometimes I wondered why an elderly customer cared so much about the thoughts of an ordinary store employee, but he always listened with complete attention, never judging me and never interrupting. One evening, as rain poured, nearly 3 months had passed since I had last seen Mr. Hayes. At first, I expected him to walk through the store doors at any moment with his usual warm smile and calm voice. Every time the entrance bell rang, I looked up, hoping it was him, but it never was. Life slowly returned to its normal routine, although something always felt missing. I often caught myself wondering if he had moved away or if he had become too sick to leave his home. I regretted never asking for his phone number or address. I had always assumed there would be another conversation, another cup of coffee, another chance to thank him for all the wisdom he had shared with me. Then, one Tuesday morning, everything changed. I had just finished arranging products on a shelf when my phone vibrated. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. Normally, I ignored unknown calls while working, but something told me to answer. "Hello, this is Ethan Carter." A calm, professional voice replied. "Good morning. Am I speaking with Mr. Ethan Carter?" "Yes, this is Ethan. My name is David Ross. I'm an attorney with Ross and Hamilton Law Firm." I frowned. "I'm sorry. I think you called the wrong person." "No, Mr. Carter. I assure you I have the correct number." My heart began to beat a little faster. "How can I help you?" "There's a legal matter regarding the estate of Mr. Leonard Hayes." The moment I heard his name, I froze. "Leonard Hayes?" "Yes." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Is he all right?" There was a brief silence. "I'm very sorry to inform you that Mr. Leonard Hayes passed away 2 weeks ago after a long illness." The words hit me like a truck. "What?" "I'm afraid it's true." I leaned against the shelf to keep myself from falling. "No, I'm deeply sorry for your loss." I closed my eyes, trying to process what I had just heard. The kind old man who had become my closest friend outside my family. The man who always smiled. The man who taught me tea. The room fell completely silent. I stared at Sarah Hayes, unable to believe what I had just heard. She looked at me with tired eyes, the kind that belonged to someone who had spent months watching a loved one slowly fade away. Even though she smiled politely, I could see the pain she was trying to hide. I don't understand," I finally said. "Your father talked about me?" She nodded. "He did. More than you could ever imagine." I looked at attorney David Ross. "There has to be some mistake." David calmly shook his head. "There isn't." Sarah slowly opened the leather folder in front of her. "My father kept a journal during the last year of his life." She carefully removed a notebook filled with handwritten pages. He wrote about his business, his family, and about one person he believed restored his faith in humanity. She looked directly at me. "That person was you." I couldn't say a word. Sarah gently opened one page. "My father wrote this 6 months ago." She smiled sadly before reading aloud. "Today, Ethan refused the tip I offered him. He smiled and said, 'Sir, your thank you is enough. I have spent my entire life surrounded by people who valued my money more than my friendship. Today I met someone different.'" My throat tightened. "I don't even remember that." "You probably don't," Sarah replied softly. "Because for you, it was just another normal day." She turned another page. "Most people ask who I am before deciding how to treat me. Ethan never asked. He respected me simply because I was another human being." Tears slowly formed in Sarah's eyes. My father admired that more than any business achievement. I looked down at the table. I never knew. No, she whispered. He made sure you wouldn't. David Ross leaned forward. Mr. Hayes didn't want you to know he was wealthy. Why? Because he wanted to know who would still treat him kindly if they believed he was just an ordinary old man. Sarah nodded. My faith. My hands trembled as I unfolded Leonard Hayes' letter. The room was so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat. Sarah and attorney David Ross remained silent, giving me the time I needed. I took a deep breath and began to read. My dear friend Ethan, if you are reading this, then my time in this world has come to an end. Please don't waste your tears on me. I lived a long and meaningful life. Instead, I want you to focus on the future because that is where your journey truly begins. I paused for a moment, tried to hold back my emotions. The letter continued. When I first walked into your store, I wasn't looking for groceries. I was looking for hope. My doctors had already told me that my illness could not be cured, and I had begun to lose faith in people. Everywhere I went, I saw greed, lies, and selfishness. I wondered if genuine kindness still existed. Then I met you. Tears rolled down my face. Every conversation we had shared came rushing back to me. I remember the first cup of coffee I offered him, the afternoons we spent talking about life, the countless times he thanked me for simply listening. I had never imagined those small moments meant so much to him. Sarah quietly handed me a tissue. My father wrote that letter over several weeks, she said softly. He wanted every word to come from his heart. I nodded and continued reading. You never asked about my wealth. You never treated me differently because of money or status. You respected me simply because I was another human being. That reminded me of the man I wanted to be when I was young. I lowered the letter for a moment. I don't understand, I whispered. Why me? David Ross gently pushed another folder toward me. Because Leonard believed kindness is the greatest qualification a person can have. He opened the folder. Inside were legal documents, financial reports, and photographs. My father created the Hayes Foundation 30 years ago, Sarah explained. It provides. I stared at the documents in front of me, still unable to believe how quickly my life had changed. A few months earlier, I was standing behind a store counter, scanning groceries and worrying about ordinary problems. Now I was sitting in a large office, looking at property records, financial reports, and responsibilities I had never imagined carrying. I looked at Sarah and shook my head. I still feel like I'm not the right person for this. Sarah leaned back in her chair and smiled. Why do you keep saying that? Because this world is completely different from my old life. Managing properties, dealing with tenants, making financial decisions. I have no experience. Sarah crossed her arms. Ethan, do you know what my father valued most about you? I looked down. My kindness. Not just that. She pointed at the documents. He knew you would never make decisions only for profit. He believed you would remember the people behind the numbers. I stayed quiet. A few days later, Sarah introduced me to Carlos, the person who would teach me everything about property management. Carlos was standing beside a large apartment building when we first met. So you're the man Leonard trusted with everything? I nodded nervously. Yes. Carlos smiled. Then I hope you're ready to learn. I am. He looked at the building. Tell me what you see. I looked up. An apartment building. Carlos laughed. That's what everyone sees. Then what should I see? He pointed toward the windows. Families. Problems. Dreams. Responsibilities. I listened carefully. A building isn't just concrete and walls, Ethan. It's someone's home. Those words stayed with me. During the first few weeks, Carlos showed me every part of the business. He taught me about maintenance, contracts, tenant concerns, budgeting, and emergency situations. One afternoon, I made my first major mistake. I looked at the report in my hands and felt my confidence disappear. Carlos, the more I learned about property management, the more I realized that success was not about owning buildings. It was about understanding people. Every morning, I arrived earlier than before. I studied reports, walked through properties, spoke with employees, and listened to tenants. I wanted to learn every detail because I knew Leonard had not trusted me with his legacy, so I could simply sit behind a desk. One afternoon, I was reviewing maintenance records when Carlos walked in my office. You've been here since 6 in the morning. I looked up from the papers. How did you know? Because the cleaning staff told me you were already here when they arrived. I smiled. I still have a lot to learn. Carlos shook his head. You have learned something more important. What? You care. I leaned back in my chair. Is that enough? Carlos looked at me seriously. No, caring alone isn't enough. You also need discipline, patience, and wisdom. But without caring, all those things become meaningless. His words reminded me of Leonard. I spent the next few weeks visiting more properties. I wanted to understand the lives of the people who depended on us. One day, I met a young family struggling with rent payments. The father looked nervous when I entered the office. Mr. Carter, I know we're late again. I sat across from him. Tell me what happened. He looked down. I lost some hours at work. I'm trying to catch up. I studied his face. Years earlier, I might have only looked at the numbers. I might have seen a late payment and a problem. But now I saw a person. A father worried about his family. A man trying his best. I need to ask you something, I said. He looked up. Are you planning to leave without paying? His eyes widened. No, never. I just need some time. I nodded. Then let's find a solution. He looked surprised. You mean you're not going to remove us? No. Why? I smiled. Because a difficult month doesn't deaf. I thought I had finally found peace. My days were filled with learning, improving properties, and building relationships with people who depended on me. Every morning, I reminded myself that I was no longer the person who felt abandoned and powerless. I was building something meaningful. But growth did not mean life became easy. There were still difficult days. There were still moments when I doubted myself. One morning, I walked into the office and saw Carlos studying a report with a serious expression. What happened? I asked. He looked up. We have a problem with one of the older buildings. I immediately sat down. What kind of problem? The repair costs are much higher than expected. I looked through the documents. How much? He told me the amount. My first reaction was frustration. We can't ignore this. No, we need to fix it. Carlos nodded. Some people would sell the building. I looked at him. Would that be the easiest option? Yes. I closed the report. But easiest doesn't always mean right. Carlos smiled. You're thinking differently now. I spent the entire day studying the situation. The building needed repairs, but many families had lived there for years. Selling it would have forced people to leave their homes. I called a meeting. When everyone entered the room, they expected a financial decision. Instead, I said, we're repairing the building. One manager looked surprised. Mr. Carter, the cost will reduce our short-term profits. I know. Then why? I looked around the room. Because those apartments are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. People live there. The room became silent. I continued. We can make money and still do the right thing. After the meeting, Carlos walked beside me. You sound like Leonard. I smiled. I hope that's a compliment. It is. Those words meant more than he knew. Months passed. My confidence grew, but I never stopped learning. I still made mistakes. I never expected my life to become this different. A year ago, I was worried about paying bills and wondering if I would ever find a better future. Now, I was sitting in meetings, making decisions that affected hundreds of families, and carrying the responsibility Leonard Hayes had left behind. But despite everything changing around me, I tried to keep one thing the same. I wanted to remain Ethan, the person who listened, the person who cared, the person Leonard believed was worth trusting. One morning, I walked into the office and noticed Carlos looking frustrated. What happened? I asked. He placed a file on my desk. We received several complaints about one of the new properties. I opened the file. What kind of complaints? Some tenants say the previous management ignored their problems. I looked through the reports. Broken elevators, delayed repairs, unanswered requests. I felt disappointed. How long has this been happening? Carlos sighed. Almost a year. I looked at him, and nobody fixed it. They focused on profits. I closed the file. Then we fix it. Carlos smiled slightly. I knew you would say that. I stood up. Can you arrange a meeting with the tenants? Today. Yes. You don't need to go personally. I looked at him. Actually, I do. That afternoon, I entered the apartment building and met several residents. An older man approached me. Are you the new owner? Yes. My name is Ethan Carter. He looked surprised. You actually came here? I smiled. Yes. I wanted to hear directly from you. A woman stepped forward. We've complained many times before. I know, and nothing changed. I nodded. I'm sorry that happened. The man looked at me carefully. You are different from the last owner. I asked, why do you say that? Because you're listening. Those words stayed with me. I spent hours talking with the residents. I didn't promise things I couldn't do. I didn't make fake spee. I never imagined that the hardest part of rebuilding my life would not be learning business. It would be learning how to let go of the past. For months, I had focused on becoming better, but a small part of me still carried the pain of what happened with Emily. I never talked about it, but sometimes old memories appeared when I least expected them. One evening, I was sitting in my office after everyone had left when Sarah walked in. You are still here? I looked up and smiled. I had some reports to finish. She looked around the empty office. Ethan, you don't have to work until midnight every day. I laughed softly. I'm still learning. Sarah sat across from me. You know, my father was the same. I smiled. Really? Yes. He believed responsibility meant never stopping. I looked at the documents on my desk. Maybe that's why I understand him. Sarah studied my face. Or maybe you understand him because you have the same heart. I looked away. I don't know about that. Why not? Because sometimes I still feel like the same person who lost everything. Sarah became quiet. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. When Emily left, I thought my life was over. I thought I wasn't enough. Sarah listened carefully. But now, I looked around the office. Now I know my worth wasn't decided by someone else's choice. She smiled. That is the biggest lesson you have learned. I nodded. For the next several months, I continued improving everything Leonard had trusted me with. I created programs to help struggling tenants. I improved maintenance systems. I worked with employees instead of just giving orders. One day, Carlos walked in my office with a smile. You won't believe this. I looked up. What happened? The tenant satisfaction reports came in, and they're the highest they have ever been. I smiled. That's good. Carlos laughed. Good? Ethan, this is amazing. I shrugged. We just did what was right.